My husband likes to say that I never met an idea I didn't want to improve. He used to say it with a smile, back when it was still a joke. Now, when I play it back in my head, I hear what it really was, a warning I refuse to listen to. I'm the kind of woman who reads 3 books, listens to 5 podcasts, and turns a normal Tuesday into a project. My friends used to tease me and call me a one-woman committee. At work, that made me valuable. At home, it turned me into something else. If I'm being honest, this story isn't about my husband failing our marriage. It's about me deciding that empowering our marriage meant upgrading him. And you can only live as someone's project for so long before you start planning your escape. When I met Daniel, I was fresh out of a women's studies program and convinced I saw the world clearly for the first time. I'd grown up watching my mother bend herself around my father's moods, shrinking when he was stressed, expanding when he needed praise, carrying the invisible workload of birthdays and appointments and emotional temperature checks. I promised myself I would never turn into her. Then I met this man who seemed like the antidote to everything I'd feared. Daniel was soft-spoken, easily embarrassed, the kind of guy who made sure everyone got home safe after a party. He listened when I talked about patriarchy and emotional labor. He actually asked questions. "You're the first guy I've met who doesn't get defensive when I say men," I told him once. He smiled in that lopsided way of his. "Maybe I'm broken," he said. In a good way. I mistook that self-deprecating humor for progressiveness and emotional intelligence. Maybe it was, a little, but mostly he was conflict-averse. He didn't like being the center of attention. He didn't like being wrong. He didn't like arguing. At the time, I called it respect. We slid into a relationship so gently, it almost felt accidental. One day we were 2 people watching documentaries and sending each other essay links. The next, we were talking about moving in together, like it was the most obvious next step in the world. I remember the first time I improved him. We were at a dinner with my friends from college. The conversation shifted to pay gaps and how many of us were the default planners in our relationships. My friend Leah said something about her boyfriend never buying toilet paper unless she explicitly asked. And everyone laughed in that tired way women do when they're laughing instead of screaming. "Right, Daniel," I said, nudging him. "You've learned about emotional labor now. You know better." Everyone looked at him. He flushed, shoulders hunched, and gave an awkward little nod. Later, in the car, he said, "Did you have to put me on the spot like that?" I frowned, genuinely confused. "I was complimenting you." "It didn't feel like a compliment," he said. "It felt like I was in class and you were pointing to me as the good student." "Well," I said, half joking, half not, "maybe you should just accept that I'm right sometimes." It became our dynamic. I provided the reading lists and the vocabulary. He tried not to say the wrong thing. I told myself that made us progressive. We got married 3 years in. A small ceremony, no father giving the bride away, no vows about obedience, no white dress because I didn't like the symbolism. My mother cried anyway. My father shook Daniel's hand a little too hard and made a joke about good luck, and everyone pretended not to hear the edge in it. I remember standing there, looking at Daniel's nervous smile, thinking, "We're going to do it right. We're going to build a marriage on equality and mutual respect and growth." I just didn't realize I'd translated mutual growth into he grows in the direction I'm pointing. The first big project I took on was his career. Daniel was a graphic designer at a mid-sized company. Stable job, decent pay, great benefits. He didn't hate it, but he didn't love it either. He'd come home, drop his bag, and say things like, "It's fine," with the resigned shrug of someone who's decided fine is good enough. I couldn't stand that. "You're talented," I told him. "You could be doing so much more." "I don't need so much more," he said. "I like predictable." Predictable, the word made my skin itch. I was reading all these books about women not settling, about stepping into your power, about refusing to live small. Every paragraph felt like it was speaking directly to me. I underlined sentences like, "If your partner is not evolving, they're dragging you backward." So I decided I would not be dragged backward. I framed it as support. I signed him up for webinars. I sent him job postings. I bought him a fancy notebook and wrote, "Dreams start here," on the first page in my neatest handwriting. Babe, I don't really want to start over somewhere else, he said, flipping through it with a strained smile. You're scared, I said. That's normal. But fear isn't a good enough reason not to try. The thing is, sometimes fear is a good reason not to upend your entire life. Sometimes people actually know their own limits. But I didn't trust that he did. I trusted that I did. Within a year, he'd left the job he didn't hate for a freelance life he wasn't ready for. I told everyone he'd bravely taken the leap. I posted pictures of his home office on Instagram and wrote captions about believing in your partner. What I didn't post was the look on his face when invoices were late and we had to dip into savings, or the way he stopped sleeping through the night, or the way sex vanished between us quietly, like something that had been smothered. When he circled a job listing one evening and said, "Maybe I'll go back to something stable, just for a while," I felt a surge of panic. "We can't go backwards," I said. "You're not that guy anymore." He nodded slowly, pushed the paper away, and I felt like I'd saved us from something. I didn't realize I was building a life where his feelings were data I could override if they didn't fit the narrative. The second project was our communication. Every article I consumed told me the same thing. Relationships live or die on communication. So I decided we would communicate perfectly, which, in practice, meant I would communicate a lot and he would keep up. If he was quiet at dinner, I'd say, "What are you not telling me?" If he said, "I'm fine, just tired," I'd say, "That's not an answer, Daniel. Use your words." If he got frustrated and snapped, "Can we not do this right now?" I'd say, "This is exactly when we should be doing this." I framed refusal as emotional immaturity. Needing space was stonewalling. Asking for time to think was avoidance. I watched videos about holding space, but in reality, I turned every conversation into a performance review. I used therapy words like weapons, projection, gaslighting, toxic patterns, words that sounded righteous and clinical, but landed like accusations. Once, after a long day for both of us, he came home and sank onto the couch without saying anything. I sat down next to him, already bracing. "How are you feeling?" I asked. He shrugged, drained. "Emotionally or physically?" "Both." "What triggered the emotional part?" I pressed. He stared at the TV. "Work." "What specifically about work?" I demanded. "You're being vague. If you can't name it, you can't process it." He turned to me then, eyes tired. "I just wanted to sit with my wife for 5 minutes without having to give a TED talk about my feelings." I scoffed. "Enjoy your emotional illiteracy, I guess." He didn't fight back. He just turned the volume up slightly and watched the screen. I told myself his silence was proof I was right, that he was shut down, unevolved, scared of vulnerability. The truth was simpler. I was exhausting. The third project was, ironically, empowering us sexually. In the beginning, we'd had the kind of sex that happens when you're young and infatuated and staying up too late. It wasn't wild, but it was warm and easy, with a lot of laughing and whispered apologies when someone's elbow went where an elbow should never go. As my feminism solidified into a lens I used for everything, sex became complicated. I started reading about mental load in the bedroom, about how women perform for the male gaze even in private, about how we internalize scripts that don't serve us. All of that was true and important, but instead of applying it with him, I applied it to him. "Don't say you look sexy," I snapped once when he reached for me. "I'm not an object you evaluate." He pulled his hand back like I'd burned him. Okay, what should I say?" "Nothing," I snapped. "If you need a script, it isn't real." We had a fight later when I read some post about how men should be more intentional initiators, and I accused him of being passive. He stared at me, bewildered. "You get mad at me when I compliment you," he said. "You get mad when I try to initiate. You get mad when I don't initiate. I don't know what the rules are." "The rule is do better," I said. He laughed once, a short, humorless sound. "I think the rule is read your mind and hope I get it right." I hated him for saying that. I felt mocked, but deep down, it stung because it was true. Over time, intimacy became another area where he felt graded instead of wanted. We still went through the motions occasionally, but it was like clocking in. There was no spontaneity, no silliness, no softness, just a feeling of being observed, even by myself. I looked at my own husband and fought in bullet points. Is he centering my pleasure? Is this feminist enough? Is he being adequately communicative? I never once stopped to ask, do I still like him? Does he still feel liked? The real turning point came the night I accused him of being threatened by my growth. It was a Tuesday, nothing special. I'd just gotten promoted at work to a leadership role in my department. My boss told me they needed more strong women at the table. I drove home feeling like every late night and every boundary I'd ever set had been worth it. I walked through the door, expecting Daniel to be proud. He smiled, hugged me, said, "That's amazing, babe," and popped a frozen pizza in the oven, because he knew I wouldn't want to cook. But later, when I was on the couch, laptop open, answering emails that couldn't wait, I noticed him in the doorway, watching me. "What?" I asked, already defensive. "Nothing," he said. "Just, you've been really in it lately, with work." "I just got promoted, Daniel. Of course I'm in it." "I know. I'm happy for you." He hesitated. "I just miss you." There it was, the dangerous word. Miss, lack, need. "So I should be less ambitious so you feel more comfortable?" I shot back. His face tightened. "That's not what I said. That's what you meant." "No," he said quietly. "I meant that I would like to talk to my wife without her checking her email in the middle of every conversation." "You're threatened," I said, heart pounding with righteousness. "You liked it better when I needed you more." He stared at me stunned. "How did you get that from what I just said?" "Because it's obvious," I snapped. "You were fine when we were on the same level. Now that I'm moving up, suddenly I'm gone and you miss me." He opened his mouth, closed it, shook his head. "I don't know how to talk to you without being turned into a case study," he said finally. "Whatever I say, you translate it into some article you read." I laughed in disbelief. "So now I'm wrong for educating myself?" "I didn't say that," he replied. "But it feels like there's no room for me to be human. You're always analyzing, correcting, upgrading. I feel like a bad app you keep updating instead of a person you married." We stood there in the living room, staring at each other, years of love wrapped in new layers of resentment. "If you're insecure about my success, that's not my problem," I said. "You should go to therapy and work on your fragile masculinity." Something in his face closed then, subtle but final, like a door gently latched. "Okay," he said, "you win." At the time, I thought that meant I'd won the argument. I hadn't realized he was done playing the game. He asked for the divorce 6 months later. There was no drama around it. No affair, no screaming, just exhaustion. We were eating takeout in silence, the kind that feels physical, when he put his chopsticks down and said, "I can't do this anymore." My first thought was, oh good, he's finally ready to go to therapy. "What kind of can't do this are we talking about?" I asked, forcing a light tone. "Marriage counseling can't do this, or separation can't do this?" "Divorce," he said. The word landed between us with shocking calm. I laughed, because that's what my brain does when it short-circuits. "You're being ridiculous," I said. "We're just in a rough patch." "We've been in a rough patch for 3 years," he replied. "I just kept believing it would get better if I tried harder." "Okay, and now you're giving up?" "No." He met my eyes. "Now I'm choosing myself." I rolled mine. "That's cute. Did you read that on Instagram?" He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I can't even have my own words," he said. "You have to assume everything came from somewhere smarter than me." "That's not fair," I snapped. He nodded slowly. "You're right, it's not. But I'm done pretending this is working for me." "We took vows," I said, hearing how cliched it sounded and hating myself for it. "You don't just walk away because you're uncomfortable." "I'm not uncomfortable," he said. "I'm disappearing." The silence that followed felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. "I've tried to catch up to you," he continued. "Read what you told me to read, talk the way you wanted me to talk. I've tried to be as evolved as you need your partner to be. But every time I get close, you move the finish line." "That's not true," I whispered, even though it was. "You don't want a partner," he said gently. "You want proof. Proof that men can change, that feminism works, that you didn't become your mother, and I've been some kind of experiment for you." "That's incredibly dramatic," I snapped. "You're not a victim here." "I know," he said. "I'm a volunteer, and I'm unvolunteering." Tears sprang to my eyes, hot and humiliating. "So that's it? You're just done?" "I've been done," he said quietly. I just finally said it out loud. I felt like I was falling. You're really willing to throw away this marriage instead of doing the work? He nodded once. I've been doing work, just not the kind you respect. I've been working on staying, on shrinking myself so I don't set you off, on not saying what I think because I don't want to trigger a 2-hour lecture, on pretending I don't mind being a constant self-improvement project. That's not what this has been, I protested. He looked around the room, at the stack of books on the coffee table, at the framed quote in the hallway about strong women, at the whiteboard on the fridge where I'd written weekly goals for both of us. He raised his eyebrows slightly. I followed his gaze. For the first time, I saw it through his eyes, and it made my stomach twist. I'm not the man you want, he said kindly. That kindness hurt more than cruelty would have. And you're not the wife I need. I think we tried. But I can't keep living under a microscope. He stood up, took his plate to the sink, and rinsed it out like we were just cleaning up after any other meal. I wanted to throw something, to scream, to beg. Instead, I sat there, staring at the dent his plate had left on the placemat, and realized I had no idea how to ask him to stay without turning it into another assignment. People talk about the stages of grief like they're neat. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Mine were less organized than that. They came in loops. For a while, I clung to denial. I told my friends he was having a crisis. I told my therapist he was scared of a powerful woman. I told myself that this was what happens when men are confronted with their own fragility. It helped that some of my friends backed me up. You outgrew him, one said. It happens. Men don't like when you force them to look in the mirror, another added. They meant well. They saw the pieces I showed them. The late nights, the arguments where he'd shut down, the way he was always fine but never specific. They didn't see the way I interrupted him mid-sentence because I'd already predicted his thought and decided it was wrong. They didn't hear the tone I used when I corrected his language. They didn't feel the way the air changed when I walked into a room already armed with talking points. My therapist, to her credit, didn't immediately side with me. You've told me a lot about what he did wrong, she said one day. What do you think he would say about you? If he had to summarize the marriage, I scoffed. He'd probably say I nagged. All men say that when a woman holds them accountable. Maybe, she said, or maybe he'd say something else. What do you think that might be? The question lodged in my chest. I thought of his face at the table the night he said divorce. How blank it looked when I accused him of being threatened by me. How many arguments ended not with him yelling, but with him saying, okay, and going quiet. He'd probably say I pushed, I admitted. How? She asked. On everything, I said. Work, communication, sex, politics. I wanted us to be better. What if, she said gently, he didn't want to be better by your definition? He should, I snapped. Why should I have to carry all the self-awareness? She looked at me for a long moment. Sometimes, she said, we confuse self-aware with self-righteous. I bristled. Are you saying I'm self-righteous? I'm saying, she replied, that it might be worth exploring whether you trusted your frameworks more than you trusted your partner's internal experience. I left that session angry. I told myself she didn't get it, that she was minimizing patriarchy, that she hadn't heard enough about the toll it takes on women. But that night, alone in the bed that suddenly felt too big, I replayed her question. What would he say about you? I tried to imagine it honestly. She doesn't listen. She explains. She doesn't ask how I feel. She tells me what I should be feeling. She doesn't let me be wrong or messy or contradictory. She fact-checks my emotions. It was nauseating to admit, but it was the first time I allowed myself to see that my feminism, my need to do relationships right, had turned into a form of control. I wasn't fighting patriarchy at home. I was recreating it with the genders swapped. The divorce went through faster than I expected. When you don't fight about assets or custody or cheating, the state doesn't really care why you're breaking up. You sign some papers, you pay some fees, and just like that, a decade of your life is converted into a case number. We sold the apartment. He moved into a smaller place closer to his new office. Yes, he'd gone back to a stable job, one he chose on his own without asking for my input. I moved into a loft with big windows and plants and shelves full of the same books that had once made me feel so certain I was on the right path. For a while, I threw myself into work. I did panels. I ran workshops. I wrote essays about emotional labor and the invisible work women do in relationships. None of those words were lies. I've seen too much to ever say that patriarchy isn't real or that women aren't crushed by it every day. But under the applause and retweets, there was this small, persistent voice asking, "And what about what you did?" I muted it with more noise. More activism, more productive anger, more content. People praised me for being strong and uncompromising. No one asked why my husband had left. Or if they did, I gave them the version of the story where his problem was my power. It was easier that way. The first time I saw him again was almost a year later. I was at a coffee shop near my office, hovering between oat milk options, when I heard his laugh. I turned, hard in my throat. He was at a table by the window with a woman I didn't recognize. She looked normal, not in a dismissive way, just soft. Comfortable clothes, hair in a low ponytail, face bare except for a little mascara. She was talking and he was listening with his whole body, the way he used to with me, before every conversation became a debate. There was something different about him too, a looseness in his shoulders, the quiet confidence of someone not waiting to be corrected. I froze. Part of me wanted to bolt. Another part wanted to march over and introduce myself as the ex-wife he'd outgrown so I could watch them squirm. Instead, I stood there, pretending to study the pastries, until he glanced up and saw me. For a second, he looked startled. Then he smiled, small, polite. He said something to the woman, who turned to follow his gaze. He lifted a hand in a tentative wave. I walked over, because not walking over felt more awkward. "Hey," I said, cursing how shaky my voice sounded. "Hey," he replied. "It's been a while." The woman smiled. "You must be Ava," she said. "I've heard a lot about you." My stomach tightened. What had he told her? That I was controlling? Overbearing? A cautionary tale? "I'm Claire," she added. "We work together." Her tone was warm but neutral. No possessiveness, no defensiveness, just information. We made small talk, weather, work, the kind of conversational filler you use when there's a chasm of history no one wants to fall into. "I saw your article in The Current," Daniel said at one point, "about emotional labor." "Oh," I tried to smile. "Yeah, thanks. It was good," he said. "Hard to read, but good." "Hard how?" I asked before I could stop myself. He hesitated. Claire glanced between us, sensing something unspoken, then excused herself to get a refill. When she was out of earshot, he said, "It made me think a lot about your mom, and about us." I braced, ready for criticism, ready to gear up into defense mode. Instead, he shrugged slightly. "I'm glad you're helping people put words to things," he said. "I just wish we'd had a version of those conversations that didn't turn me into the enemy." I swallowed. I know. We stood there in the middle of the coffee shop, the noise around us muffled by the weight of everything we weren't saying. "I really did want us to work," I said quietly. "I thought I was helping." "I know you did," he said. That almost made it harder. "Do you?" I hesitated. "Do you hate me?" He looked genuinely surprised. "No," he said. "I don't hate you. I just couldn't be married to you." It wasn't meant as an insult. It was a simple statement of fact. Somehow, that hurt more than any insult could have. Claire came back then, smiling, holding 2 drinks. The way they moved around each other, comfortable, easy, made something twist inside me. Not jealousy exactly, more like grief for the version of us that might have existed if I'd known how to let him be himself. "Well," I said, stepping back, "I should let you 2 get back to it." "It was good to see you," he said. And I believed him. That hurt too. I walked out into the cold air, feeling like my ribs had been rearranged. I wish I could say that moment transformed me overnight. That I went home, burned my old frameworks, and emerged as some enlightened, fully healed version of myself who never tried to fix anyone again. Reality is messier. It took time, therapy, humiliation, a lot of staring at my own reflection and admitting that I had used feminism, not consciously, but effectively, as a shield against accountability. It's a sick joke. I spent years railing against partners who treat women like they're projects, only to turn my own husband into a self-improvement plan. I still believe in everything that lit me up back then. Pay gaps are real. Emotional labor is real. The way men are socialized to avoid vulnerability is real. But there's a difference between sharing that awareness with someone and wielding it over them like a grading rubric. I didn't give Daniel room to grow at his own pace. I loved him conditionally. As long as he was moving toward the ideal man in my head, he was worthy. The second he lagged or expressed a different preference, I saw it as regression. Empowerment, when you strip away the buzzwords, isn't about dragging someone to where you think they should be. It's about believing they're capable of navigating their own path, even when it doesn't match your map. I didn't do that. I took the wheel in the name of equality, and then got mad when he jumped out of the car. Sometimes late at night, I replay our last year together and mentally rewrite my lines. I imagine myself saying, "What do you want?" and then actually listening. I imagine backing off when he said he was tired instead of insisting we process. I imagine celebrating his small joys instead of treating them like side quests to the main mission of growth. Would it have saved our marriage? I don't know. Maybe we were always going to break. Maybe we were fundamentally incompatible. Or maybe, if I'd learned how to love the man I married instead of the theory of the man I wanted, we'd be on our couch right now, older and softer, arguing about something stupid like which show to watch and laughing 5 minutes later. I'll never know. That's part of the punishment. You don't get to retry the same level with better skills. You just live with the knowledge that you held something fragile too tightly and it cracked in your hands. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself, if you hear echoes of your own voice in my corrections and critiques, this is the only thing I can offer you. Ask yourself, honestly, if you're empowering your partner or engineering them. If the person sitting across from you feels like they have to earn your acceptance by evolving fast enough, long enough, loudly enough, you're not building intimacy. You're building a performance. And no one can keep performing forever. I know, because the applause I thought I wanted, the promotion, the praise, the proof that I was a strong woman who wouldn't settle, sounds a lot quieter in an empty apartment. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think about how you show up in your own relationships, sit with that. Talk about it. And if you feel brave enough, share your thoughts, your regrets, your own downfall diary. You'd be surprised how many of us are out here, realizing too late that we didn't lose the life we wanted by being weak. We lost it by being so sure He didn't even raise his voice when he said it. That's what haunts me the most. No slamming doors, no teenage screaming, no dramatic meltdown I could dismiss as hormones or a phase. Just my son, sitting on the edge of the couch, fingers curled into his jeans, eyes shiny and exhausted, saying in a voice that sounded too old for 16, "I hate you, Mom." Then silence. A low hum from the fridge in the kitchen. A car passing outside. My own heartbeat hammering so loudly in my ears, I could barely hear what came after. "You don't see me. You've never seen me. You just see this thing you're fighting." He gestured at himself like he was some symbol, some enemy. Not the boy whose forehead I used to kiss when he pretended not to like it. I remember staring at him, mouth half open, a retort loaded and ready. Something about how he was being dramatic, or how he didn't understand the world yet, or how everything I'd done for him, for us. But for once, the words didn't make it out. You know how sometimes your brain takes a snapshot you can't unsee? That moment is a permanent photograph in my mind. The soft overhead light casting a cold halo around his head. The way his left sock had a little hole in the toe. The faint shadow of stubble on his jaw, the kind that appears overnight and never goes away. And those eyes, my ex-husband's eyes, brown, steady, sad. There was a time I would have said my ex-husband ruined my life. Now I know I did most of that myself. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If this is going to be a confession, I have to start before my son ever had the chance to hate me. Back when I thought I knew exactly who the villains were. I grew up in a house where my father's chair at the table was a throne. He didn't hit us. People always ask that, like it's the only metric for harm. No, he didn't hit us. He just controlled the air in the room. We ate when he ate. We laughed when he laughed. We watched what he wanted on TV. My mother's face had this permanent half-smile, half-flinch. She packed his lunch every morning with this weird frantic tenderness, like if she cut the sandwich wrong, he'd withdraw something invisible. He'd say things like, "Men are logical, women are emotional," whenever my mom cried at a commercial or I contradicted him. He'd roll his eyes at my opinions, the way you do at a child playing dress-up. The first time I heard the word feminist, I was 13, hunched over the family computer late at night, secretly reading forums. I remember finding this thread about emotional labor. Women describing how they kept track of birthdays, doctor's appointments, every small domestic detail, while their partners just existed. There were women in there saying, "I feel like the project manager of my own household, and I swear to God, it felt like they were describing my mother." I clicked link after link, read essay after essay, falling down a rabbit hole of anger and vocabulary. Patriarchy, misogyny, internalized sexism, emotional labor. I learned words for things I'd only had nameless resentment for. It was intoxicating, like someone switched on a light in a dark room. I promised myself I'd never be like my mother, that I'd never smile through being ignored like she did. You know how some people find religion and become newly converted evangelicals? That was me with feminism. And I'm not talking about the quiet, measured kind. I inhaled the most aggressive takes I could find, the threads where every nuance was stripped away and every man was a potential abuser waiting to happen. I was young, I was angry. And the internet is very good at feeding angry young people the most extreme version of whatever they believe. So when I met Mark in college, a quiet, bookish guy who held doors for people and genuinely listened when you talked, I still cut him off mid-sentence the first time we talked about anything remotely political. "Look," I told him, in that smug tone I used to mistake for educated, "you can't possibly understand what it's like. You benefit from patriarchy just by existing." He blinked, then nodded slowly. "You're probably right," he'd said. "So, do you want me to listen and learn, or should I leave you alone?" I wasn't used to being asked that. Most guys either argued or laughed it off. The fact that he accepted my premise made me soften. I told myself he was one of the good ones. The exceptions. We dated. We graduated. We moved in together. I took a job at a nonprofit that focused on women's rights. He taught high school English. In the beginning, it felt like balance. He cooked. I managed the finances. He did laundry. I handled planning. We split things, or at least it felt that way. We had long conversations about gender, and when he disagreed with something I said, I didn't always bite his head off. Not always. But there was this edge in me, a tension, a constant scanning for injustice, even in my own living room. If he forgot to buy toilet paper after I'd mentioned we were low, typical. Of course the woman has to keep track. If he interrupted me once in a group conversation, "Wow, did you even hear yourself? You just steamrolled me." If he liked some bikini photo on Instagram before unfollowing an account, "So you respect women, but you also objectify them silently?" Sometimes I was right. Sometimes he did something careless, and I called it out, and he apologized, and we moved on. But sometimes he just looked tired, like he was on trial all the time. We talked about kids maybe 5 years into our marriage. I wasn't sure I wanted any. I was terrified of losing myself, of turning into my mother, orbiting around a man and a child, my identity shrinking to wife and mom. But there was this ache, too, this little imaginary boy in my head that followed me around, curious and soft and full of questions. I feel like if we had a son," I told Mark one night, "I could raise one good man. One man who doesn't do what my father did, who doesn't become that." He'd smiled softly. "Then maybe we should try, and maybe we'll screw it up, but we'll try." Our son arrived on a rainy Thursday. The nurse laid him on my chest, and for the first few seconds, all the labels fell away. There was just him, warm, squalling, rooting blindly for something to hold on to. I'd never felt so full and so empty at the same time. We named him Lucas. I told myself I would be the best mother. No, not just best mother. I would be the blueprint, the one who broke the cycle, the feminist who raised a feminist son. And that's where it started going wrong. Not with that intention, with how I executed it. At first, I did the normal new mom stuff, or what passes for normal in a society that worships exhaustion. I nursed until my nipples bled. I read every parenting blog that confirmed all my biases. I argued with my own mother about cry it out versus attachment parenting. I went to mommy groups, but I didn't really fit in. The conversations were full of stroller brands and pureed foods and husbands not helping enough. I agreed with the last part, but I was more likely to bring up systemic patriarchy than nap schedules. So I gravitated online again, into these spaces where people talked about radical parenting and deconstructing gender in the home. They had checklists for raising boys. Don't let them interrupt. Don't let them roughhouse too much. Don't buy them toy guns. Don't let relatives tell them, boys will be boys, without a stern lecture. Some of that was good, necessary even, but the way I internalized it. I didn't see Lucas as a child. I saw him as a potential problem to be prevented. When he ran around the living room at 4, making explosion sounds with his toy spaceship, I'd stiffen. Hey, I'd say, we don't glorify violence. Can you make it a science mission instead? He would blink at me, then slow his play like he'd been caught doing something shameful. When he interrupted me and marked talking because he was excited about something, I'd snap. Lucas, what did we say about talking over people? That's not respectful, especially not over women. He was 6. When he cried because another kid at school called him a crybaby, I didn't hug him. I launched into a speech about toxic masculinity and how the kid was just threatened by his emotional openness. He sniffled through it, nodding, trying to be brave. I didn't see how badly he wanted me to just hold him. I told myself I was empowering him, teaching him early, raising him right. What I was actually doing was interrogating him constantly for signs of an oppressor he hadn't even had the chance to become. It wasn't just him. I policed Mark too. If he came home tired and forgot to ask about my day, evidence. If he said, "Can we talk about this later? I'm fried," when I started on patriarchy in the classroom, evidence. If he instinctively reached for Lucas when he cried and I just sat down, evidence. Of what exactly? Being human, probably. But in my head, it was always building a case. We fought more. Not at first. At first, it was small. I'm just saying, you snap at him a lot. Mark told me one night after Lucas had gone to bed. He's 5. You talk to him like he's, I don't know, a teenage boy who catcalled you. Because that's how it starts, I shot back. You think those teenage boys just wake up one day and hate women? No, they're raised that way. I'm not going to coddle him into becoming some entitled man. You're his mom, he said quietly. He needs some coddling, from someone. I rolled my eyes then. You have to understand, I was so deep in my own narrative that anything that sounded like softness toward men felt like betrayal. He'll thank me someday, I said, for not letting him be like every other guy. Mark didn't argue. That was almost worse. He just dimmed, little by little. By the time Lucas hit middle school, the distance was visible if you knew where to look. He still hugged Mark easily. They had inside jokes. They played video games together and went on bike rides and sat on the porch with their matching mugs of hot chocolate in winter. With me, everything was cautious, formal. Lucas, what do we say when someone interrupts? Lucas, how do we make sure we're giving winning space to talk? Lucas, what's wrong with saying like a girl as an insult? Lucas, do you realize how that joke might make girls feel unsafe? It sounds good on paper. You can probably imagine a version of that parenting that turns out amazing. But I wasn't gauging his age, his emotional capacity, his need for fun and love separate from a constant moral lesson. He started avoiding me, not dramatically, just enough that I had to seek him out instead of the other way around. Oh, I already told Dad, he'd say when I asked about his day. I'm going to my room, he'd mutter when I came into the living room. If I sat at the table, he'd find a reason to get up soon after. And still, I told myself it was normal. Mom as disciplinarian, Dad as fun parent. I'd seen it 100 times. I just happened to be disciplining him ideologically. You want to know when the crack really widened? 8th grade. Parent-teacher conference. We're sitting in those tiny chairs that make adults look vaguely ridiculous. listening to his homeroom teacher talk about how bright Lucas is, how engaged, but how sometimes his jokes land wrong. "He's not mean," she said quickly, seeing my face tighten. "I want to be clear about that. He makes people laugh. But there have been a few times where girls in the class felt uncomfortable. Group chats, teasing, that kind of thing." My chest turned to ice. Here it is, I thought. The thing I'd been trying to stop. The inevitable patriarchy rearing its head. "What exactly did he say?" I asked, my voice too sharp. She gave a few examples. Some were genuinely not okay. Some were just awkward child banter blown through the filter of adults, already on high alert. A meme about women be shopping, a joke about simping when a boy carried a girl's books, the word bitch quoted from a song in a text. I checked out mentally. I didn't stay to hear the nuances. I was back in my teenage bedroom, watching my father talk over my mother, and every boy in that classroom became him. And Lucas became a smaller version. We barely got in the car before I turned on him. "What the hell is wrong with you?" I demanded, slamming the door harder than I meant to. Lucas flinched. "Mom, it wasn't. After everything I've taught you, after all the conversations we've had, you're still out here making girls feel unsafe?" His eyes filled rapidly with tears. He was trying to blink away. "They laughed," he said. "Nobody even said they were uncomfortable. The teachers just, she doesn't get it. It's just jokes." "Oh, just jokes," I snapped. "You sound exactly like every man who's ever hurt a woman and then shrugged it off. Just jokes. Just locker room talk. Do you have any idea how disappointed I am in you?" That did it. His face went flat. The tears vanished like they'd been wiped from inside. "Sorry I'm such a monster," he muttered, turning to stare out the window. "You should be sorry," I said. And I meant it. In that moment I meant it. We drove home in silence. Mark tried to mediate later, but I was too high on righteous anger to hear him. Lucas barely spoke to me at all for a week. Another snapshot for the guilt album. The divorce came when Lucas was 14. People always want some big inciting incident. An affair, a betrayal, some dramatic explosion. But that's not how it happened. Not really. It happened in 100 small withdrawals. It happened when Mark stopped coming to me with frustrations because anything he said that included "I feel" turned into a debate about privilege. It happened when I accused him of weaponized incompetence, for genuinely messing up the laundry. It happened when we tried to have sex, and he flinched when I brought up feminism mid-argument earlier that day, and I mocked him for not being in the mood when it's not on your terms. And it happened on a Tuesday when he said, softly, "I don't think you like men. At all. Including me, including our son." And I laughed. I actually laughed. "Oh my God, you sound like those guys online who cry about misandry. Grow up." He nodded then, not in agreement, in resignation. "I'm done," he said. "I can't do this anymore. The rest is dull logistics. Papers, mediation, 2 bedrooms for Lucas to bounce between like a ping-pong ball. He chose to live mostly with Mark. That should have been my wake-up call, but I found a way to frame even that in my favor. "Of course he wants to live with you," I told Mark oily. "You don't hold him accountable. You get to be the fun dad." "He's scared of you," Mark replied quietly. "That's not accountability." I told my friends he was parroting internalized misogyny. I told my therapist, or couples therapist, briefly, that Mark couldn't handle a strong woman. The therapist, to her credit, tried to steer me gently toward introspection. I accused her of siding with him, and stopped going. Feminism gave me language for real things, real injustices. But in my hands, it had become a shield I could hide behind, and a sword I swung wildly, cutting even the people I claimed I loved. Lucas stopped coming over as often. At first it was subtle. Homework, friends, sports. Then it became missed weekends and last-minute cancellations. When he did come, he moved through my apartment like a ghost. Headphones in, door closed. Polite, careful replies to my questions. "How's school?" "Fine." "How's your dad?" "Fine." "Any girlfriends I should know about?" "No." I didn't realize how much he'd already retreated from me until the night he finally said those words. The "I hate you" night. It wasn't even a big argument that triggered it, not compared to others we'd had. He was 16, taller than me now, his voice deeper, his hair longer in that messy way that made him look older and younger at the same time. He'd come over that Sunday after we hadn't seen each other in 3 weeks. I'd cooked his favorite pasta, an attempt at olive branch wrapped in red sauce. We ate awkwardly, talking about his classes, his plans, the kind of surface stuff you discuss with acquaintances. I kept looking for a way in, a crack. I found the wrong one. "So," I said lightly, swirling my fork, "I saw you liked some interesting pages on Instagram." His jaw tensed. "You're stalking my socials now?" "Don't be dramatic," I said. "You follow public accounts. I'm your mother. I pay attention." He shoved his plate back slightly. "Okay, and, I said, my voice sharpening despite my intention. "Half-naked TikTok girls doing thirst traps? Really? You think that's what women are for? To be scrolled past and rated?" He stared at me. "They're just videos." "Just videos," I repeated. "That's exactly what they said about porn, and look where we are now. Do you ever think about the pressure girls are under because boys like you consume that stuff like it's nothing?" "I'm not boys like me," he snapped back, heat in his eyes finally. "I'm just, I don't know, watching shit my friends send me. It's not that deep." "Everything is that deep," I shot back. "Every click reinforces something. Every view is a vote for how the world should be. You think you're immune to the messages in that content?" He pushed his chair back. The legs scraped with a sound I felt in my teeth. "You always do this," he said. "Take some small thing and turn it into proof that I'm going to become this monster in your head." "That's not what I said." "That's what you've always said," he cut in. "Since I was like 6. You talk to me like I'm some ticking time bomb of misogyny you have to defuse." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. He laughed then. Bitter. Too old. "You know what Dad does when he catches me watching something he doesn't like?" he asked. "He talks to me like I'm a person, not a representative of everyone who ever hurt you." "That's not fair," I protested, heat rising in my face. "You have no idea what it was like for me growing up. The things I learned, the things I watched happen to women." "You're right," he said. "I don't. Because you never talk about it like it's yours. You talk about it like it's mine, like I did it, like I'm responsible for fixing it." I tried to steer it back to the moral high ground. "So what? I'm just supposed to let you objectify women? Let you grow up thinking their worth is in how they look?" "Jesus, Mom," he muttered, dragging his hands over his face. "I don't think that. I never thought that. I literally grew up with you pausing movies every 5 minutes to lecture me about gender politics. That's because media is full of harmful." "I know," he shouted, then stopped, took a breath, dropped his voice back down. "I know. I get it. I really do. But you never once looked at me and said, 'Hey, Lucas, you're doing okay. I'm proud of you.' It's always what I might turn into, what I have to prove I'm not." My throat closed. I scrabbled for control, like I always did when I felt accused. "My job isn't to make you comfortable," I said stiffly. "It's to raise you into a man who doesn't harm women. If that means you don't always feel good about yourself, that's a price I'm willing to pay." He stared at me like I'd slapped him. Maybe I had, in a way. "Yeah," he said, after a long beat. "I figured that out a long time ago. That me feeling okay never really mattered to you." "That's not true," I said, too quickly. "I love you. Everything I've done has been about you," he finished quietly. "Your guilt, your anger, your fear, your politics. You ever think about what it's like to grow up and realize your mom doesn't see you? She just sees men, like this blob of evil you're trying to fix." Tears stung my eyes. "Lucas, that's not fair. I know you're angry, but that's not fair." He nodded, more to himself than to me. "You're right," he said. "It's not fair." Then he sat back on the couch, looked me straight in the face, and said, "I hate you, Mom." It wasn't a tantrum. It wasn't a scream. It was a verdict. My whole body went cold. "No," I said automatically. "You don't mean that. You're just—" "I do," he said. "I hate what you turned me into in your head. I hate how everything I do is wrong because of what someone else did to you. I hate that you made me feel like I was born guilty, like I was born dangerous. I hate that when I mess up, and yeah, I mess up, you treat it like proof you were right about me." He swallowed hard, eyes shining. He didn't look away. "And I hate," he said, voice breaking now, "that you made me scared of you, when all I ever wanted was for you to like me. That, that was the crack, the fissure that opened up and swallowed every justification I'd ever had. All this time, I thought I was raising him to be a good man, but what he'd learned was that he was bad. By default, by gender, by existence. I wanted to say something, to rush to him, to hold his face and say I was sorry, but I was frozen. My brain, so quick to assemble arguments in every other conversation, completely failed me. Maybe that makes me terrible, he said, standing up, voice shaking. Maybe hating your mom is the worst thing a person can do, but at least it's honest. At least it's mine. He grabbed his backpack, slung it over his shoulder. You can tell yourself whatever you want about why I don't come over anymore, he added from the doorway. Internalized misogyny, patriarchy, whatever. But the truth is, I can't breathe around you. Then he left. The door clicked shut, like a period at the end of a sentence that rewrote my entire life. You'd think that would have been the moment I had my big revelation, that I'd collapse in tears, scroll through my old texts and posts and realize the error of my ways instantly. Real change is slower than that, uglier, full of backpedaling and self-defense. For weeks afterward, I tried every mental contortion to avoid accepting what he'd said. He's a teenager. They say awful things all the time. He's under his father's influence. Mark's been poisoning him against me. He doesn't understand how dangerous it is to be a woman. He's just privileged. I told my friends different versions of the story where I was still mostly right. I edited out the parts where I sounded cruel. I emphasized his disrespect, his ingratitude. But late at night, replaying his words, there were things I couldn't unhear. You made me feel like I was born guilty. You never once said you were proud of me. I can't breathe around you. The awful thing is, I'd heard other women say similar things about their fathers, their controlling mothers, their abusive partners. I'd been so busy viewing him through the lens of potential harm doer that I'd become something not entirely unlike the thing I swore I'd never be. Not violent, not physically cruel, but emotionally oppressive, righteous to the point of being tyrannical. I started going back through our interactions in my head, not the big blow-ups. Those are easy to dramatize, to excuse as we were both heated. I thought about the smaller moments. Him handing me a drawing he made in elementary school, proud, and me saying, "That's nice. Did you include any girls in your superhero team?" Him telling me about a crush, and me immediately steering it into a lecture on consent instead of just letting him be giddy. Him crying at 10 because someone at school said his interest in cooking made him girly. And instead of saying, "That kid's an idiot, you're fine," I turned it into a 20-minute TED Talk on gender roles. Every one of those intentions had some truth, some goodness in it. But they piled up on him like weights, like I was hanging my entire cause on this one boy's shoulders. I went to therapy, real therapy, not the kind where I used all the right language to stay one step ahead of the therapist intellectually, not the kind where I framed myself as the enlightened victim of an ignorant world. A woman named Carla sat across from me, week after week, and instead of arguing with my feminist framework, she asked annoyingly simple questions. When Lucas was little, how did you show him you enjoyed him? Not what you taught him, not what you warned him about. How did you show him you liked who he was as he was? I'd open my mouth to respond and nothing. I had memories of correcting, instructing, cautioning, very few of delight, of laughter. Can you separate the men who hurt you from the boy you raised? She asked another time. I wanted to say yes, obviously yes, but if I had, we both would have known I was lying. We talked about my father, my mother, the ways I'd watched women swallowed by accommodating men. We talked about the nonprofit, the countless stories I'd heard from women whose lives had been wrecked by male violence or neglect. Your anger is valid, she said. Your fear, too. Your feminism didn't appear out of nowhere. It was a survival strategy. Then why does it feel like it's killing the one relationship I cared most about? I whispered. Because survival strategies aren't always good blueprints for living, she replied gently. Sometimes you armor up so much you crush the people who were never attacking you. We didn't do some magical forgiveness module. I didn't march over to Lucas's dad's house with a tearful apology and have everything fixed in one montage. I texted him, first, simple messages. I heard what you said. I'm thinking about it. You're right that I made a lot of things about me. I'm sorry for that. I love you. I know that doesn't fix it. Just wanted you to know. He didn't respond at first. Days turned into weeks. When he did reply, it was a cautious, "Thanks for saying that." We saw each other in small ways, a coffee here, a lunch there, mostly logistical check-ins. He kept his emotional armor up, and I didn't blame him. I forced myself, every time we talked, to hold back the lecture that bubbled up when he mentioned anything remotely gendered. When he said a girl in his class was dramatic, I almost launched into a speech about sexist language. Instead, I asked what happened. He told me. I listened. I didn't turn it into a broader statement about women. I didn't make it a teachable moment. I just let his story be his. It felt like learning a new language after years of only speaking one. I wish I could tell you that one day he threw his arms around me and said, "I don't hate you anymore." That would be a neat ending. Real life isn't neat. He's 19 now, in college. We text more. We talk sometimes on the phone. We sat at the same table for his high school graduation celebration, making stilted jokes over cake. He calls Mark dad and me mom. He doesn't say "I hate you" anymore, but he hasn't taken it back either. Those words are still out there, between us, like a monument to the version of me I used to be. A few months ago, he called me unexpectedly on a Wednesday night. "Hey," he said. I could hear street noise behind him. "We watched this documentary in one of my classes about domestic labor, emotional labor, all that stuff you used to talk about." My first instinct was to say, "See, I was right." I bit it back. "Oh," I said instead. "What did you think?" "It was interesting," he said. "I get now that a lot of what you were mad about was real. Like system stuff, not just personal. It's messed up." "Yeah," I said softly. "It is." There was a pause. "I think I just wish you taught me that without making me feel like I was born on the wrong team," he added. My throat tightened. "I wish that too," I managed. "If I could go back, I'd do a lot of things differently." Another pause. I could picture him, standing under some streetlight, hair fallen into his eyes, face half-shadowed. "I know you would," he said quietly. "I believe you." We didn't say much more. He had to go. I hung up and cried in my kitchen for a long time. Not the self-righteous tears I